granted. I'll do it tomorrow. I'll do it later. I'll do it when I'm older. I don't have to do it yet. We're in the Hajj season now, mashallah. Hajj is quickly approaching, and perhaps there are some of our community members will be going for Hajj. May Allah take them safely, look after their families, look after their property and their wealth, and accept from them. A lot of times, people have this mentality even like Hajj. I'll go later, when I'm old and gray. I have to first sow my royal oats, enjoy life. Because after you go Hajj, you can't do things anymore. You can't do it we're not supposed to. You can't do it now just because you haven't gone for Hajj. Even after Hajj, before Hajj, we're not supposed to do it. So it's a trick from Shaitan, then he tries to get us to delay these type of things. Even sometimes people ask, should I go for Hajj now? But my uncle told me that I'm still young. Or that after you go on Hajj, you can't do certain things. It's like, brother, you can't do it now also. So these are all things that we try to remember. We can't take these things for granted. Otherwise, we become like the naive, uninformed person who shows up at the market, going to buy something. And then they tell you some ridiculous price. And we, without knowing, pay that price. This is actually a hadith that the Prophet ﷺ mentions. There's a collection of Imam Bukhari, rahimahullah. I think we're all familiar with his collection of hadith. It's the most famous collection and considered to be the most authentic book after Kitabillah, after the Book of Allah itself, because it's the most rigorously authenticated collection of hadith, statements of the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ, as-sadiqul amin, the one who's truthful, the one who's trustworthy and honest, who has never spoken a lie, even when he joked, even before revelation. So we know that if the Prophet ﷺ said it, it's truth, right? If the Prophet ﷺ said something, we know it to be 100% truth. So Allah's speech is without a doubt haqq, it's truth. The Prophet ﷺ's speech is haqq also. Once we can determine that he said it, it's truth. So the hadith collection of Imam Bukhari has this very high rank. He has a section in his collection, Kitabul Riqaq, the book of softness, where he collects hadith that have to do with those traditions and teachings of the Prophet ﷺ which will help soften the heart of a person. Riqqatul qalb, yani leenul qalb, to have a soft heart. And the opposite of which is qaswatul qulub, that you don't want to be hard-hearted, live life jaded, not caring about things anymore. The believer will always try to maintain a soft heart. So he has a section where he has the book of softness of the heart, where he mentions a hadith which will help soften the heart of a believer. And this was a habit of a lot of scholars of the past, where they would have these short booklets in order to help the believer be reminded of the hereafter. Now, when you look at this collection, or this particular chapter in his collection, how does he start the chapter? And I've spoken a little bit about these type of things in the past, where how the scholar organizes his book is not random, and it actually is very telling wisdom and scholarship of the scholar himself. They say fiqhul muhaddith fi tarajimihi, that the scholar of the understanding of a scholar can be understood in the way that he organizes his chapters. The way that he organizes his chapters and his books. What hadith did he mention in that chapter? Which hadith did he mention first? So famously, again, not to dwell on this too much, famously Imam Bukhari, he began his entire collection of hadith with a very famous hadith that most of us have probably heard before. إِنَّمَا الْأَعْمَالُ بِالنِّيَّاتِ, that deeds are according to intentions. And he started his whole book of hadith with this one hadith, because he's reminding the believer that before you do anything, make sure your intention is right. Because it doesn't matter what you do and how amazing it is that you do outwardly, or how much praise people give you. If Allah doesn't accept it because of a corrupt intention, it'll be wasted. So for something as great as collecting the hadith of the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ. Imam Bukhari decides to mention this hadith first. Don't bother even reading the rest of my book if your intention is corrupted. What's the point of trying to learn your religion and practice your religion if your heart and your intention is corrupted? You're doing it for show. You're doing it for your own egotistical progress. And it was a reminder for himself too, that before I collected this hadith and this book of hadith, I want to make sure my own intention was right. This was a wisdom. So now he has this book of riqaq, Kitabu Riqaq, the book regarding softness of the heart. What's the first hadith that he mentions there? To help a believer kind of soften their heart so that they can start to understand how they should live their life. So in this particular hadith, which was narrated by Imam Bukhari, who states, حدثنا المكي بن إبراهيم قال أخبرنا عبد الله بن سعيد وهو ابن أبي هند عن أبيه عن ابن عباس رضي الله عنهما وعنهم قال قال النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم نعمتان مغبون فيهما كثير من الناس الصحة والفراغ. Very famous hadith, perhaps, that many of us again have heard before. And Imam Bukhari narrates on the authority of his teacher Makki ibn Ibrahim. And this particular scholar is a very senior scholar and teacher of Imam Bukhari. Imam Bukhari came at a time where the shortest chain that he has back to the Prophet ﷺ, it is what are called the thulathiyat. And about 2 years ago we did a program here where we actually recited the collection of those, for those of you who remember. We had a little program, a long weekend program, and we read through that collection of thulathiyat of Imam Bukhari. They're the shortest chains and collections of hadith in the entire collection of Imam Bukhari's book. So out of about whatever 7,000 hadith, there's about 24 or so, 24, 25, where there are only 3 people between Imam Bukhari and the Prophet ﷺ. As you know in hadith, you have to mention who you heard it from and who they heard it from with an unbroken chain back to the Prophet ﷺ. So Imam Bukhari, when he mentions his teacher and that chain back to the Prophet ﷺ, the shortest chain that he has to the Prophet ﷺ is 3 people between him and the Prophet ﷺ. And half of those 25 or so hadith which were narrated were from this particular scholar, Makki ibn Ibrahim. So he states that Abdullah bin Sa'id narrated to me from his father on the authority of the companion Abdullah bin Abbas, may Allah be pleased with all of them, that the Prophet Muhammad, peace and blessings be upon him, said, there are 2 favors that many people have been fooled about. Maghbunun fihima. And this is a word that's used in business for someone to be bamboozled and to be tricked and to be deceived. Buying a used car, mashallah, with some broken transmission, it'll be $8,999. And they buy it, drive it home, don't realize it's a lemon. These type of things happen, unfortunately, to people. But this is the Prophet ﷺ saying that the worst is these people who have been tricked into taking for granted 2 things. What are those 2 things? As-sihhatul faragh, their health and their free time. When you have health in your life and you have time and you still don't use that to obey Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, then this has been the biggest fool. This is the person who has been the most deceived. Because we take it for granted. This is more valuable than wealth itself. It's like a person who has whatever millions of dollars and they buy bubble gum with millions of dollars. They buy useless things with their wealth until they completely squander it. No concept of how to manage it. Allah Ta'ala has blessed many of us with these 2 things. And they're more valuable than anything of the material world. Some people will have health, but they're completely preoccupied and they don't have time to do good deeds beyond their obligations. Some people, mashallah, they have a lot of time, but they're not healthy. They're bedridden. If you have both, what will be our excuse before Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for not doing anything with it? The Prophet ﷺ himself has then mentioned that this is going to be the person who was the most deceived person, because they had these two things. They had the capital that was needed in order to become truly wealthy, acquire the wealth of the hereafter, but they didn't do it. As the Prophet ﷺ mentions in another hadith, "Ad-dunya mazra'atul akhirah," that this world is essentially like a barren farm for the hereafter, and you reap what you sow. So based on plant in this world, you will reap what you sow in the hereafter. Just like when you plant a seed, you don't see the product immediately. You have to wait for it. It's the same thing with our deeds. But the deeds are not inconsequential. They're not something that we can just simply dismiss and think that, oh, it's okay, it's already passed. Or I did this, but it's not a big deal. Everything is a big deal with Allah, because every moment is what makes up our life. We think of our life in the big picture, but we don't actually think about what makes up our life. Our life are these moments that we have. Our life is a compilation of every day that we live. One day shouldn't be dismissed as being invaluable, because it could be that one day that becomes a source of salvation in the hereafter, and it could be a source of eternal wrath in the hereafter. This ties into the last hadith that I'll share. It's also a very famous hadith. And the Prophet ﷺ, it's a warning. And I actually just received a message this week about a person who I've been helping to some degree, who deals with a very severe case of clinical anxiety. I'm not the psychologist, they get the proper help that they need, but on the religious parts of it, I do my best to help. And he sent me a message about this hadith where it extremely triggered their anxiety, where they became uncertain of what to do. And what am I even supposed to do with my life? What's the point of doing anything? And it's a hadith where the Prophet ﷺ mentions that, and I'll get to the portion which relates to what we're speaking about, that a human being, a person, the Prophet ﷺ mentions, فَوَاللَّهِ إِنْ أَحَدَكُمْ أَوِ الرَّجُلَ يَعْمَلُ بِعَمْلِ أَهْلِ النَّارِ, that there will be a person who does the deeds of the people of the fire throughout their life. He'll do the deeds of the people of fire. حتى ما يكون بينه وبينها غير باع أو ذراع فيسبق عليه الكتاب, until there is simply a handspan or an arm's length, a wingspan between him and the fire, and then what has been destined will overtake their life. And فَيَعْمَلُ بِعَمْلِ أَهْلِ الْجَنَّةِ, and he will do the deeds of a person of paradise, فَيَدْخُلُهَا, and then enter into paradise right before their death. And how many times, what does it take for a person to become from the people of paradise? It's a simple moment of saying La ilaha illallah. And I've seen it with my own eyes. People on their deathbed take their shahada and pass away within 24 hours. And that's a moment of time that can change a person's destiny. Not to be, again, belittled. But on the opposite end, the Prophet ﷺ also mentions that there'll be a person who does the deeds of Jannah until they get a handspan or arm's length away from paradise itself, and that which is destined will take over, and they'll do the deeds of a person of the fire and enter into the fire. So a moment of bad decisions will cause them then to lose what had been an entire life of work, and they'll enter into the fire. Now this could lead into a whole nother conversation of qadr, but the focus here then is the purpose of what we're talking about is not to take any moment for granted in our life, because those moments in our life are what make up our life. Those moments in our life are what makes up our life, and that moment can be the difference between entering paradise and entering the fire. We also have a program tonight where we'll further discuss this hadith and the concept of time and its value and not taking any moment in our life for granted. May Allah Ta'ala help us understand. وآخر دعوانا أن الحمد لله رب العالمين وصلى الله على النبي الأمي وآخر دعوانا أن الحمد لله رب العالمين. إن الحمد لله نحمده ونستعينه ونستغفره ونستهديه ونؤمن به ونتوكل عليه ونعوذ بالله من شرور أنفسنا ومن سيئات أعمالنا من يهده الله فلا مضل له ومن يضلل فلا هادي له وأشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له وأشهد أن سيدنا وحبيبنا محمدا عبده ورسوله أرسله بالحق بشيرا ونذيرا بين يدي الساعة. من يطع الله ورسوله فقد اهتدى ورشد ومن يعص الله ورسوله فإنه لا يضر إلا نفسه ولا يضر الله تعالى شيئا. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. إن الله وملائكته يصلون على النبي يا أيها الذين آمنوا صلوا عليه وسلموا تسليما. اللهم صل على محمد وعلى آل محمد كما صليت على إبراهيم وعلى آل إبراهيم إنك حميد مجيد. اللهم بارك على سيدنا محمد وعلى آل سيدنا محمد كما باركت على سيدنا إبراهيم وعلى في العالمين إنك حميد مجيد. اللهم اغفر للمؤمنين والمؤمنات والمسلمين والمسلمات الأحياء منهم والأموات. اللهم اشرح صدورنا للإسلام. اللهم حبب إلينا الإيمان وزينه في قلوبنا وكره إلينا الكفر والفسوق والعصيان وجعلنا من الراشدين وجعلنا من الراشدين وجعلنا من الراشدين. اللهم اغفر لأمة محمد صلى الله عليه وسلم. اللهم ارحم أمة محمد صلى الله عليه وسلم. اللهم تجاوز عن أمة محمد صلى الله عليه وسلم. اللهم انصر الإسلام والمسلمين وأذل الشرك والمشركين ودمر أعداءك أعداء الدين. اللهم إنا نجعلك في نحورهم ونعوذ بك من شرورهم. اللهم إنا نجعلك في نحورهم ونعوذ بك من شرورهم. اللهم إنا نجعلك في نحورهم ونعوذ بك من شرورهم. اللهم اكفناهم بما شئت. اللهم اكفناهم بما شئت. اللهم اكفناهم بما شئت. ربنا آتنا في الدنيا حسنة وفي الآخرة حسنة وقنا عذاب النار وقنا عذاب القبر وقنا عذاب الحشر وقنا عذاب الميزان. ربنا تقبل منا إنك أنت السميع العليم وتب علينا إنك أنت التواب الرحيم. وصل اللهم وبارك وسلم على خير خلقك محمد المصطفى الأمين وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. سبحان ربك رب العزة عما يصفون وسلام على المرسلين والحمد لله رب العالمين. إن الله يأمر بالعدل والإحسان وإيتاء ذي القربى وينهى عن الفحشاء والمنكر والبغي يعظكم لعلكم تذكرون. وأقيموا الصلاة.
الله أكبر الله أكبر. أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله. أشهد أن محمدا رسول الله. حي على الصلاة حي على الصلاة قد قامت الصلاة. الله أكبر الله أكبر. لا إله إلا الله.
سووا صفوفكم فإن تسوية الصفوف من إقامة الصلاة. Please do your best to straighten the rows. Fill the row ahead of you before making a new row behind you. If you have any cell phones, please turn them off or put them on silent. وَصَلُّوا صَلَاةَ الْمُوَدِّعِينَ. And we should pray like this is our last salah. Allahu Akbar. الحمد لله رب العالمين الرحمن الرحيم مالك يوم الدين إياك نعبد وإياك نستعين اهدنا الصراط المستقيم صراط الذين أنعمت عليهم غير المغضوب عليهم ولا الضالين. سبح اسم ربك الأعلى الذي خلق فسوى والذي قدر فهدى والذي أخرج المرعى فجعله غثاء أحوى سنقرئك فلا تنسى إلا ما شاء الله إنه يعلم الجهر وما يخفى ونيسرك لليسرى فذكر إن نفعت الذكرى سيذكر من يخشى ويتجنبها الأشقى الذي يصلى النار الكبرى ثم لا يموت فيها ولا يحيا قد أفلح من تزكى وذكر اسم ربه فصلى بل تؤثرون الحياة الدنيا والآخرة خير وأبقى إن هذا لفي الصحف الأولى صحف إبراهيم وموسى. الله أكبر. سمع الله لمن حمده. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. الحمد لله رب العالمين الرحمن الرحيم مالك يوم الدين إياك نعبد وإياك نستعين اهدنا الصراط المستقيم صراط الذين أنعمت عليهم غير المغضوب عليهم ولا الضالين. ألهاكم التكاثر حتى زرتم المقابر كلا سوف تعلمون ثم كلا سوف تعلمون كلا لو تعلمون علم اليقين لترون الجحيم ثم لترونها عين اليقين ثم لتسألن يومئذ عن النعيم. الله أكبر. سمع الله لمن حمده. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. الله أكبر.
السلام عليكم ورحمة الله. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله.
Assalamu alaikum warahmatullah. Just a couple of quick announcements. The first is about the ISAC Summer 2024 Sports Summer Camp. Last year, we had roughly 70 to 80 youth. These youth, they came to us and they said we had so much fun that they started coming to the masjid more frequently. We even had 7-year-olds, 8-year-olds, 9-year-olds who we connected with through this summer camp. And because of that connection, they started coming to this ISAC center more frequently. So inshallah, what we want to do, or what we are doing for this year, is improving on that summer camp. So we've incorporated feedback from both parents and youth alike. We at ISAC, we want to do things 10 times better each and every time. Last year was a huge success. We don't want to just settle for the same. We want to improve on it. So to that end, what we've done for this summer camp is we've included themes that tie back to the activities that our youth are doing. We've also incorporated local speakers, members from our own community, to speak to our youth, to build that connection. And we've also included a little bit more halaqat, again, to build that connection between knowledge of the deen and what they're currently doing during these sports summer camps. And so what we hope to do, what we want to do, is continue to foster that connection between our youth and the ISAC Center, and also, of course, with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So to that end, we need your support. So please, please register your youth at isac.org/summer 2024 summer camp. It's only $75 per week. You can select which week works best for you and your children. More details are outside. There's a poster there for additional details. If you need more details, that you and I can just find me, and I'll be happy to provide you with more details. The second thing is that we have the halaqat tonight with Shaykh Musa after Salat al-Maghrib. Please come in, bring your families, and listen to the halaqat. It'll be a continuation of what we heard during this khutbah about time management.